best to break it down for you, okay? And it's really about the power of the subconscious mind. So if you were in on the full-timers call this morning, I talked just a little bit about it, but this is something most people simply don't understand. They don't understand very much about it. And listen, it's really your greatest tool, right? Okay, you have this phenomenal thing in your mind that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is working with direction that you've given it or somebody else has given it. Okay, and I stop and think about a couple things, right? Like, we have the same opportunity, right? We're in the same company, we're in the same geographic area, you have access to the same leaders, yet some people succeed wildly and other people struggle, right? And so sometimes there's an obvious reason for that, right? They're not doing what they should be doing. But what about the people that look like they're kind of doing what they should be doing? They want it just like somebody else. They make tough commitments just like somebody else. They want to win just like somebody else. And yet it doesn't happen for them in the same way it happens for somebody else. What is the difference? What causes that? See, that's a topic that I think of a lot as I watch people. Here's a good person. Here's another good person. They're both great family people. They're both making a sacrifice to be in the business and to work, but yet one of them is having such different results. How could that be when it seems like everything else is the same? Right? And the answer is hidden in the 4 inches between your ears. Okay, and so we're going to go through a lot tonight, and I believe you're going to leave here profoundly changed if you're willing to let the information change you like it changed me, right? So listen, I've got a couple of quotes here that I want to start with. One of our partners, JC, posted this. I loved it. If you don't go after what you want, you'll never have it. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. If you don't step forward, you're always in the same place. That's profound, right? Okay, but why don't people, we all know this is like true. Most of us would say, that makes sense to me. Yet most of us stay in the same place year after year, right? We have the same numbers month after month. Why? How could that be? We know what to do. We know we need to take a bold move. We know we need to play with heart at month end. We know we need to get on that phone like crazy today. We know those things, yet we don't do those things. Why? How could this be? Why do some succeed and some struggle? What is the difference between top performers and everybody else? Okay, and here, in my opinion, is the difference. It's scientifically proven that 97% of the decisions we make on a daily basis are made at a subconscious level. So what is the difference between conscious and subconscious? Guys, move on down. There's some people that want to come in. Go ahead and scoot down, right? Be coachable. Let's go. Let's go. So they're not standing in the hallway. Okay, why do some succeed and some struggle? Here's why. Here's why. Watch this, okay? The conscious mind, right, is where decisions, evaluation, and critical thinking happen. I've just shown you some information. Your conscious mind received that and evaluated what it said, right? And then you're going to make a decision about it. Your conscious mind is the mind that reasons and responds to stimulus. The problem with the conscious mind is this, right? If you look in this room around right here, there are millions of points of stimulus. This wall is a certain color, that window is a certain color. There are 70 other people sitting in here that all have different things going on. People are moving. It feels a certain way. It smells a certain way, right? There are millions of points of information coming to us that go into our conscious mind, okay? And so we have a system called the subconscious that allows us to filter out most of these things, right? Because they're not useful to us. If we had to respond to every little stimulus we had, we would never get anything done. You understand that? So the conscious is the filter, and the subconscious is where the filtered information goes to live. Okay, does everybody understand that? So your subconscious mind doesn't reason, it doesn't evaluate. Think about it like an operating system. Okay? It has instructions with which it's been given, and all it does relentlessly is perform the tasks with which you've given it, operating on the belief system with which you've given it. You following that? So conscious mind evaluates information, receives data. Subconscious mind acts on the information without thinking about it. Okay, does everybody understand that? So what is the difference between a high performer and somebody else? How many of you in here would say, I have goals in this business. I want to win at this business, right? That's important to me. Raise your hand if that's true. Now, keep them raised if simultaneously you're not doing all the things you know you could and should be doing to hit those goals. Raise your hand. Okay? Only a few hands went down. Now watch this. Put your hands down. Why is that? Consciously, we know we need to have a residual income, because if we don't, our income stops with us, and that's a problem. Consciously, we know. We've evaluated that, Dan, as a true statement. I need a residual income because I have residual bills, and so I need to make sure that that happens, right? Most of us consciously know, right, that we're not getting ahead doing the same old thing, right? Because the definition of insanity is what? Doing the same things over and over but expecting a different result. Consciously, we know that. We've evaluated that information. We've made a decision that, yes, that is correct, right? Consciously, we've made a decision that Primerica is a vehicle that can get us out of that and into the thing that we want. Yes or yes? We've all made that conscious decision, okay? The problem is our subconscious is not in alignment with the conscious decision. We all know we should eat less and exercise more. Consciously, we know this. Subconsciously, we're not in alignment with it, right? So you start something, you know you're supposed to be doing it, and then you fall back into an old pattern or habit, right? Okay, that's the human condition. That's my conscious knows there's a better way. I'm trying to will myself into it, but I'm only functioning on 3% of the decisions with this conscious mind. And the other 97% of the decisions are being made without the conscious mind, and they're being made on an operating system that maybe yet doesn't believe the same thing that the conscious mind believes. Why? Because that program has been there for a very, very long time. So that's called cognitive dissonance. That's when you know something, you know what you should be doing, yet you simply cannot seem to get yourself to do consistently that which needs to happen. And that makes you feel bad on the inside. Yes, right? Okay? You know you could be better, but you're not. Why? Because these two things are not in alignment. So try as you might, eventually the 97% is going to pull you back to the same place it always pulls you back to. Does everybody understand that? Yeah. Okay? So this is super, super important. What is the difference between the peak performer and everybody else? Because they want it just about the same. They have goals. It's important to them. Just about the same. Right? Okay? Yet one of them succeeds wildly, the other doesn't. Why? One of them does not have the subconscious working with them, the other one does. So 3% of the time, they're going in the right direction through conscious effort and willpower. 97% of the time, they're drifting back to what they always knew. The peak performer, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is moving in the direction of their goals and dreams because their conscious goals and dreams and their subconscious belief are the same. Does that make sense? Okay? So how do winners make it look easy? Right? Phil, we were out to dinner and you just said, man, you just pick these people up like right and left, right? And the guy who's managing, he's training the new person at Penn Station. I'm like, how long you been managing? Well, I've been here he's in accounting, right? He's working. I'm like, hey, give me your number, right? And he's like, you just pick these people up like that. Why? Because my subconscious belief is that I'm going to win. I'm going to find great people. I'm going to build a great organization. And so 24 hours a day, my subconscious mind is filtering the information and saying, opportunity, where you just walk by it. Because your subconscious isn't engaged, right? Your conscious is, but you're playing a battle you can never win because you're playing with 3% ammunition. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay? So let's go through some of this. Think about this. This is the greatest example of the power of the subconscious. How many of you, by a show of hands, have ever driven somewhere and then once you got there realized, I have no idea how I just got here? Okay? That is the power of the subconscious mind. Now watch this. Watch this. You've gone that way so many times that your mind does not critically need to evaluate where to go anymore. It has become a pattern on which you know how to operate. So you're driving a 4,000-pound hunk of metal, 80 miles an hour, for 20, 30, 40 minutes, maybe an hour, talking, texting, listening, yelling at your kids, and somehow you didn't crash, and you got to where you were supposed to be going with no conscious recognition of how you got there. Now stop and think about its component parts, right? You didn't say, left bicep, move 30 degrees to move the wheel left. Left foot, step on this, right? The thousands and thousands of muscular commands to control that vehicle all the way home, you had nothing to do with, yet you did it. How? The power of your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind knew the directions and knew I'm supposed to go home tonight and not end up in a ditch. And so it reacts for you, right? How many of you have ever been driving distracted, honestly, and all of a sudden something happens, you're like, "Wah!" and you get control of that thing, right? How many of you ever had that happen? How? You didn't decide that. What happened? It was an instinct and a reflex almost. Why? Because your subconscious has a picture. You at home, and it will go to extreme lengths without your approval to do that which you programmed it for. Does everybody understand that? Yeah. So stop and think about that. If it'll take you home in control of a 4,000-pound vehicle and thousands of other vehicles and oncoming traffic and all sorts of rules you got to pay attention to with no effort, it can also help you become wildly successful with what? No effort. Do you understand? The problem is most of us have never tried to take control of that which is in control of us. And so we know there's a better way. We can see it. We understand it. We even believe it. Yet we're working with something working against us 97% of the time. Does everybody understand that? Yep. Okay. So Paul said this in Romans 7:15. He said, I don't really understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate. I know what I want to do, but I don't do that thing. And I don't want to do this thing, which I do. Right? Why? It's a cognitive dissonance. I know the right thing, but I'm carrying the wrong programming. And so try as I might, it's going to be temporary. It's going to be temporary until I run out of willpower, or I can no longer decide, or I'm in a situation where instinct has to take over instead of willpower. You understand that? You were never designed to will your way to success. You were designed to program your way to success, right? Through an effortless process. When you're moving in the right direction 24 hours a day, by default, you get to the destination much more quickly, yes or yes, than having to fight yourself all the time. See, we were created for greatness. We've been what? Conditioned and programmed for mediocrity. See, we all have an operating system by which we're working on, right? Okay? So watch this. Subconscious, right? Conscious sets goals, right? I want to do this, I want to do that. The subconscious is an operating system, right? We already went through that. So here's a sobering statement. What is your operating system, you might ask? Well, what is my subconscious programmed to do? I didn't program it. How many of you feel that way? I have not purposely programmed my subconscious mind. Raise your hand if that's true. Okay? Well, you have a program, and so if you didn't put it there, somebody else did. Because it's there. Well, what is my programming doing? Look at your life. Your life is an exact manifestation of your subconscious operating program. Where you are right now, in the exact place, is the exact manifestation of what exists in your subconscious mind. Right? I'm not good enough, and so you never really try because you don't believe you're going to win. Right? Okay? Money's bad. People who have money are evil. They get there off the backs of little people. Well, guess what? Money's not going to go to a place that's not wanted. Right? Well, I want money. No, you don't. Your conscious wants the money. Your subconscious says, money's bad. Money's evil. Why? Because somebody when you were 5 years old told you that, and that's what got planted there, and now you walk around like that all the time, and you're none the wiser. Do you understand that? Okay? So take a look at your life. Your life is an exact manifestation of what exists in here. It's giving it to you by default. Everybody understand that? Yeah. Okay. So winners make it look easy. Why? Because both are aligned. Right? When your conscious goal and your subconscious operating system are working together for the same thing, you no longer need to decide. Right? How many of you think, man, it's hard to get a habit of setting 3 a day? It's hard. Raise your hand if you believe that, right? Okay? Guess what? I've never thought it was hard. Why? Because that's what I do. I don't have to make a decision, Denise, to do it. No decision's necessary. I just do. Phil, I don't need to decide to get names and numbers. I just do it. It just comes out of my mouth. Why? Because my operating system is driving me that way. Does that make sense? You follow that? Yes, right? Okay. Yes. Everywhere I go, I see opportunity. Why? Because that's what my operating system is looking for. It's looking for that for me, so I don't have to be looking for it. Right? Winners make winning look easy because they've got the power of this 97% of the decisions going the right way most of the time with no effort, just by default. Think about how powerful that is. So let me ask you a question here. Okay, this is going to tell you a couple of things. Okay, are you operating out of the subconscious or not? So are our emotions determined by our beliefs, or are beliefs determined by our emotions? So let me give you an example. Okay, so this is how you can tell if your subconscious and your conscious goals are aligned. Okay, so Eli, you want to win here, right? And you want to succeed, and you want to get out of your job, and you want to do all those things, right?
Yes.
Okay, so watch this. If your subconscious is in alignment with that, when you experience a setback on the way to the goal in which your subconscious believes you need to go, you see that setback and it doesn't devastate you emotionally. Why? Because your belief is, I'm going to get there, so I don't know what that's about, but it has nothing to do with my overall destination, so therefore I'm not going to put very much emotional stock into it. Somebody says, no problem, I'm supposed to win. That's what my subconscious thinks, so it doesn't even pay attention to the obstacle. Does that make sense? Our emotion is determined by our belief. We can be going through what other people wouldn't be strong enough to go through, but we go through it with a smile, and we don't even feel the pain. Why? Because our subconscious mind is giving us the power we need to go there. Does that make sense? Now, how do you know if your subconscious mind is not in alignment? So you have the same obstacle, right? But instead of your belief powering your passion to get there, what's happening is the same obstacle. You look at it and say, gosh, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. I don't know if this is going to work for me. Is it going to happen? Am I good enough? Does God want me here? Am I supposed to succeed? So what's happening is the feelings are determining the belief. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So the outside circumstance begins to dictate to you the fundamental belief of whether or not you're good, you should do it, if that's what you're supposed to be doing. Do you see that difference? Mm-hmm. So when your subconscious mind is not yet sold on your conscious goal, you can identify that by the fact that obstacles and outside circumstances will challenge and change the belief. Right? How many of you ever seen a dead fisheye Primerican? Right, okay, so this guy is the guy, he's going, he's all in, he's fired up, right? And then he gets some chargebacks, and then his guys don't show up, and all of a sudden his smile fades a little bit, right? And then he gets and you just see the look in their face. Their belief has changed, right? By circumstances. The circumstances changed the belief. Right? Okay, and all of a sudden this person that was going to make it big, they're not even here anymore. How could that be? They had a conscious goal that this is what I need to do. I'm going to get this done. I need to make this happen. But their subconscious never bought into that, and eventually the 97% decision took them back to where they've always been. You understand? Mm-hmm. Folks, you will walk back to that 100 times out of 100 until you change it. Do you understand? Try as you might, you can go right back to where you came from, right? Take a lottery winner. Within a few years, what happens? Why? Because a circumstance happened, but it didn't change the belief. Right? It didn't change the belief. So the belief that I'm broken, I need to play the lottery, resurfaced at some point down the road because the circumstances couldn't change who they were, right? It brought them exactly back to where they always came from. Isn't that most of us? We seem to struggle with the same thing over and over in some area or another, right? Okay? Why? Because we haven't taken responsibility for programming our operating system. We're running on the default system that we have, and for most of us, that system is not the right system. Why? Because who put the system in there?
Other people.
Other people. Parents, teachers, maybe your pastor, different friends, different people, all well-meaning, but if they programmed you for a destiny that's different than yours, how are you going to get there on that destiny operating system? If you're destined for average and ordinary because that's the operating system they put in you, and now you're trying to live the life you're supposed to, you're not going to get there because this operating system has control, what? 97% of the time. Even though you know what you want to do, you don't seem to be able to do it. Right? This can change. And it can change rapidly.
Hallelujah.
Once you're willing to acknowledge it, right? Like G.I. Joe said, now I know, and knowing is half the battle, right? Now I know, and knowing is half the battle. And now that I know, I'm responsible to do something about it. So think about your mind like a garden. Okay, how many of you have ever gardened before or tried to plant something? Some of you gardening with funny plants, okay, so we don't need to know about you. Okay? But growing a legitimate garden, folks, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, got a couple less, right? A couple less. Some of you in the back be looking all guilty, right? You start already. Now, if you ever garden, you know this, right? You could plant no seeds in the garden, and you could come back in 6 weeks, and what has taken over your garden? Weeds. See, weeds take no effort to grow. They just grow automatically, right? Just like your life is producing for you automatically what's already in there, the subconscious operating system is manifesting itself with no effort, just like weeds. Now, if you understand gardening, you go and plant that seed, you can't just plant it. You got to plant it, and you got to water it, and you got to nurture it, and you got to pull out the weeds so the weeds don't suffocate the plant you're trying to get. Well, our minds are like that. We've got to plant in them the desired crop. We got to plant the seed for the harvest that we want, and then we got to pull out the weeds that are going to come naturally through the operating system. And when we do that, we have an opportunity to have the crop that we want. But if we don't do that, all we're left with is what? The weeds. Well, most of us, right, we're walking in the weeds of our life because we've never taken responsibility to tend the garden of our mind. Does everybody understand that, right? Okay? So watch this. And I've got some more I want to share with you on this, so let me just think through real quickly. All right. So how do you reprogram? How do you reprogram? Okay, because you do have a program, right? We've established that. It's been put there by most of us, right, through some other person, okay, or some other entity, or some experience. Right, okay, and science says most of that programming is done between the ages of 4 and 9. Yeah. Between the ages of 4 and 9. If you got small kids, be careful what you tell them. Yeah. Be careful what you tell them, because they're listening and they're having their life's charted out in front of them without this information, right? Okay, so here's how you reprogram. Number one is you get clearly defined goals, okay? Why? Because here's what happens. The conscious mind is filtering things out all the time. Okay? Here's a whole bunch of information I don't need, put it away. Here's a nugget of truth. I accept this as true. I find it to be beneficial in my life. gets deposited down into the subconscious, and it begins to work on that, right? So number one is the subconscious does not understand ambiguity. Why? Because it can't reason. It can't figure out what you're trying to tell it if it's not very, very clear. You understand? It's useless to it. I don't know what this means. Gone. Okay? So you've got to have some clearly defined goal, okay? Desire, whatever you want to call it, something that Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich talks about. It's got to be a white, hot passion for this thing, okay? Whatever the attainment is, right? He calls it a definite chief aim, okay? Right? Many of us don't catch our definite chief aim because we're trying to catch 6 chief aims, right? Okay? And we got to program it one at a time, right? So a clearly defined goal, right? Something your subconscious can understand. Guess what? It understands numbers, right? I'm going to grow this month. Doesn't understand that. I'm going to do 10 this month. Now you have a shot because it can at least understand what you're telling it, okay? Number one, it's got to be clearly defined, okay? Numbers, time frames, right? Because a goal without a time frame is a wish, right? Okay? So a number, a time frame, something that is very clear on its instructions, okay? That's number one. Number two, far more important than that, is you've got to have an extreme emotional connection to the goal. Why? Because the subconscious responds strongly to emotion. Think about it like this. On the landscape of your life, there are moments. Think about your earliest memory as a child. What do you remember? What comes to your mind? Okay? It's a way that something made you feel, a traumatic event, a very positive event, something with a lot of emotion tied to it. If we look back through our life, those are the things that happen. Why? Because an emotional spike drives that deeper into the subconscious. It understands how an experience and how you felt at that point. Does everybody understand that? Okay? So stop and think about this for a second. Some of you have heard my hypochondriac story, but I think this is a great time to share that again, because I used to be a hypochondriac. That's where you always think you're sick, right? Okay, and I couldn't watch ER because like within 30 minutes I had what the person had in ER every Thursday night. I mean, literally, it was like disaster in my house, right? And my 8-year-old, she's starting to have some of these tendencies. I had a talk with her last night. She's worried about the cat. She's worried about the dog. She's worried about her brother. She's worried about, I see that from me in her starting to come out, right? And I'm like, all right, let's talk, right, about that. So I had a nice talk with her last night, because here's what would happen. I would see this thing and I would begin to get very worried about it, right? And I would, oh, this could be wrong, that could be wrong. I'd start feeling this way, feeling that way. And what would happen is my subconscious, I would obsess about it, right? And 3 different times I ended up in the emergency room with these symptoms of that which I was worried about having, right? It literally would make me physically sick because I was imagining it so vividly that it began to create that in my life, right? Okay? So Napoleon Hill calls it autosuggestion. I'm going to get to that as a couple slides down the road. Okay? The power of autosuggestion. The Bible talks about it as something called renewing your mind. Okay? So here's what happened, right? So I would be literally sick. And one day I got so tired I had to do music in the morning on Sunday. I was in the ER till like 5:30 that morning. I was just drained. I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I just had this emotional snapping point, and here's what I did. I started to keep track, right? I talked to my pastor, said, you need to renew your mind. The Bible says you need to take every thought captive to Christ, okay? That which exalts itself above God's truth in your life, you need to take captive to it. Some of you aren't believers, that's okay. What am I saying? You can think about it this way, right? It's a thought that is not true, that exalts itself over a thought that is true. You got to take a hold of that and replace it. You can't remove it, because if you remove the thought or the thought pattern, right, now you have a vacuum, and so it's going to get filled by something else. You can't remove it. You got to what? Replace it. And so what would happen is I started thinking about what I was thinking about. Okay, most of us are not thinking about what we're thinking about. We're going through life on autopilot, subconscious, controlling everything. I began to think about what I was thinking about, and I would keep track, and literally 300 plus times a day, I would have a thought that went something like this. I just felt that. That didn't feel normal. I probably have this. I think I have that. I feel sick. 300 times a day. It would just pop into my mind. I would have this feeling, right? This symptom. Why? Because my subconscious had this inside of it, and it was bringing it out. That's its job. Take the program and make it happen. Right? Does that make sense? And so what I did is I recognized it. So I thought about what I was thinking about, because thoughts are things, right? We're always moving in the direction of our most dominant thought. The Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. Right? Okay, we can't separate our life from our thoughts. Eventually, our thoughts play out on the screen of reality. Right? Okay, and so what I would do is I'd recognize it, and then I'd replace. So you got to recognize and what? Replace. Recognize and replace. And so here's what I did, right? I'd have that thought, I'd recognize it, I'd say, Dean, that's not my thought. I'd literally say that to myself, that's not my thought, and then I'd replace it. Right? So I'd say, man, in 1 Peter 2:24 says, by his stripes I've been healed. It says that if I hide your word in my heart, it bring life and health to all my body. It said the number of my days you would fulfill. All these things, right? And so I'd take what was exalting itself above, and I'd replace it with a truth, right? And guess what? It took me about 3 weeks. I never had a problem with it again. Right? But it was a battle for those 3 weeks, right? 300 times a day. I probably look like a maniac. That's not my thought. Who are you talking to? I'm talking to me. Thanks for your concern, right? Okay. But I'm talking to me, because if I don't get this under control, it doesn't matter who else I'm going to talk to. Right? Does that make sense? And so I learned before I was in the business how to take something that was trying to destroy my life and how to replace it with something that gave me life. Right? And so now I never worry about it. In fact, I operate in total confidence, right? That I have a destiny, I have a plan, that nothing's going to come against me that's not supposed to happen. If it's not my time to go, I ain't going nowhere. I don't need to worry about those things. Why? So I took this belief, Jeff, that I was going somewhere tomorrow, probably, right? Because this is probably wrong and that's right. And I traded it with a different belief that served that well-being of my life. And I did it on purpose, through purposefully programming that which I didn't like and that which I did, and replacing the two. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so I learned a very powerful principle that literally virtually anything that you want to program into your mind can be programmed by what? Recognizing and replacing. Recognizing and replacing. I'm not good at sales. Whoa. There's one of those subconscious beliefs coming up. I don't know if I'm supposed to be wealthy. There's one of those subconscious beliefs coming in. I don't know if I'm good enough. I had somebody send me a messenger today, right? She friended me on Facebook because apparently I upset somebody with something I said, and I got down to 4,999 friends momentarily, and she friended me like right away. And I'm like, hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. We need to get started. She said, I don't think I'm good enough to do that business. And I responded to her, I said, you're good enough to do anything you decide to be good enough at. But there's that subconscious belief manifesting. I'm not good enough, so I'll never be good enough. Right? And in fact, I will go out of my way to make sure I'm not good enough. I'll win $10 million. I never had $10 million, and I'll spend it all to get back to where I was. Why? Because that's where my subconscious thinks I belong. It's taking me back to the trailer. Because that's where I belong in my subconscious programming. You're not one of those people, Tanya. That's just the way our family is. That's not how you're going to be. Well, you could do that, but don't get your hopes up too high. Right? You probably would be better off as this sort of person or that sort of person. Right? These little things most of us aren't even aware are there, and they're controlling every aspect of our life. We take $1 million opportunity and we make it back into our $50,000 reality because that's where we think we belong. Does everybody understand that? Okay. How are we doing on time here? Good? Perfect. All right, we got some time to go through this stuff. Okay, so you got to recognize and what? Replace. Recognize and replace. Right? So when I would have thoughts in this business of I don't know if I'm good enough, and I did a lot, so that's not my thought. I can do all things through Christ. He didn't say except go 5 by 5 for your division promotion, right? In the subnote B of John 1, right? Okay? Subnote B says, Dan, you can do all things through Christ except for Dan Maddox, who can't do Primerica through Christ. That is accepted in the Bible, okay? In the New Living Translation. Accepted you, right? Okay? Did it say that? No. Okay? So that thought that you can't do it is trying to exalt itself over what God said you can do. You better take that thought and put it in captivity and recognize it and replace it instead of accept it as true for you.
That's good.
Do you understand? Well, I just don't know if I could ever be like that. That's a limiting belief, right? I can do all things, right? Okay, you need to have this mindset of I recognize this limiting belief. I recognize this subconscious operating pattern, and I'm going to recognize and I'm going to what? Replace. I'm going to recognize and I'm replace. I don't know if I'm good enough. That's not my thought. There are people that started with less than me, that are less talented, that have gone much farther than I could ever dream to go. I can do it because they've done it. I replace that thought, right? And sooner or later, guess what happens? It makes it through your conscious mind into your subconscious, and all of a sudden the negativity goes away, and you look at the adversities and the obstacles, and they don't cause your emotion to shift because you've changed your belief. Your belief is creating your emotion instead of the other way around. Does everybody understand that? You get what I'm saying there? Right? Okay? So you've got to purposely program where you're trying to go, and it starts by what? Recognize and replace. Recognize and replace. The power of meetings and big events. Why does Primerica take you out of the field? 100% of its salespeople for 3 days. Right? You know how much money they lose in those 3 days?
Yeah.
A lot. Why do they do that? Why do I take you out of the field 2 nights a week and put you in a meeting here? Why? Because what? Because the emotion that's created in a meeting or a big event cannot be recreated individually. You're not standing there in your house like, man, I'm fired up. I'm excited. You're psyching yourself up in front of the mirror. You're like, man, I'm going to be big. I mean, you can't get that, right? Somebody comes and challenges you, and you're like, man, that guy, I can't stand that guy. I'm going to beat him so bad. You're looking in the mirror like, man, that guy, he sucks, right? Like, that's not happening on your own. So what happens? The power to tie your thought here, I could do this, to an emotion that is large has the ability to drive that thing into your subconscious much more quickly and at a much deeper level than you could ever have without the emotion of it. Does that make sense? Okay? That's part of the magic of what happens here, right? At some point, most of you, and don't raise your hand, you don't have to, but most of you at some point sitting in some meeting, you made a decision here to do this, didn't you? Right? For those of you who are like, man, I'm a lifer here, I'm going to win. At some meeting, somebody said something, and you had an experience that you said, all right, boom, that's it. Why? Because it's got to not just be recognized and replaced, but it's got to be recognized, replaced with an emotional charge to it. Does that make sense? Okay, with an emotional charge to it. So again, he calls it auto-suggestion in Think and Grow Rich. The Bible calls it gosh, I just blanked on it. Renewing your mind, right? Okay. So you've got these 2 different ways of doing it, right? So auto-suggestion is the art of suggesting to yourself that which you want. Because guess what? Your conscious doesn't understand true from not true. Your subconscious does not understand true from not true. If it gets there, it's true. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. If it gets down there, right? How many of you do things you know are not the best thing? Doesn't matter that that belief is not true and it's not helping, you still do it anyway. Why? Because your subconscious doesn't care whether it's true or not. That's just the direction you gave it, and it doesn't think, it doesn't reason. Your conscious reasons, gives it the form, and then it acts on the form. Does that make sense? Right? Okay, so as a man thinketh what? So is he. The power of life and death is held in the tongue. Right? So here's what happens. Napoleon Hill says, if you suggest something to yourself long enough, with enough emotional vividness, if that's a word, eventually your subconscious accepts it as true and begins to act on it. How many of you know a pathological liar? Okay, wonderful. What is the difference between a pathological liar and somebody who lies?
They believe they're lying.
The pathological liar believes the lie is true. How could this happen? Because they have said it enough times that it becomes ingrained in their subconscious. It is now true for them. And so even though it's false, it becomes true to them, and it begins to affect their reality and other people through a falsehood that is true to them that they're acting on.
Isn't that everyone, though, who thinks less of themselves than what they are?
What do you mean?
We're all pathological.
Well, sure. Okay. Yeah. At some point, right? You have accepted a non-truth about you that you're acting on as truth. You're exactly right. Okay. It's the same sort of idea, right? Is we've got something down inside there. So what's the purpose of that? You can take something that is not, and you can program that, and your subconscious will begin to act on it as if it were, and bring those results about in your life. Right? The Bible says faith is the substance of things hoped for, and the what? The evidence of things not yet seen. What does that mean? Right? Faith is the substance, what the things hoped for are built out of, and the evidence of things not yet seen. Right? Everything that's ever been has been created twice. First in the mind of man, and then in reality. The chair you're sitting in right now, before it was ever built or manufactured, some guy drew that chair exactly, didn't he?
Yep.
He made it. Every nook, every cranny, every finish, every stitching pattern, that was created somewhere. Okay? And then created in reality. So what is the point of that, right? So you can take something that is not, and you can call it as though it were. So you don't see yourself as a great leader right now, but you can begin to call yourself a great leader. And if you call yourself a great leader long enough, often enough, with enough vivid charge emotionally, your subconscious will begin to believe you are a great leader. And instead of working against you making the wrong choices, it will begin to say, well, you're a great leader. This is what a great leader does. I'm going to do it for you because that's what you've told me to do. Does this make sense? Yes. Okay. So watch this. So I'm going to, where's Mel? Is she in here? Okay, so I'm quoting your wife here, buddy.
Awesome.
Okay, this is something I love here. This is one of the best quotes I've seen from Stephen Furtick. The pain of falling short is nothing compared to the pain of stopping short. The pain of falling short, even though it hurts, is nothing compared to the pain of stopping short. See, quitting is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, right? And what happens is, why do people give up? Right, on something they know is right, something they know they should be doing, would help their life, right? Why? Because they get tired of battling the subconscious. I know to do this, but I just can't, and I can't handle this over and over again. Folks, we've got to reprogram. So here's a couple of things of homework that I'm going to give you tonight. Okay? Here's a couple of things of homework. I want you to identify 2 or 3 limiting beliefs that you hold. And I want you to write them down, okay? 2 to 3 limiting beliefs, and I want you to write them down, okay? And then what I want you to do is I want you to come up with a statement that is in opposition to that, a replacement statement, okay? Maybe some of you feel like you're not good enough, okay? Right? I'm not good enough. That's a root of what you think, right? Well, maybe your statement is, I'm a child of God. I've been fearfully and wonderfully made.
Good.
That would be in opposition of I'm not good enough. How could you be not good enough? You don't make no trash. You learn trash all by yourself, right? He didn't make the trash. You accepted the trash. Somebody gave you some trash and you were 5 and you didn't know how to reject that and say no thank you, right? Okay? So maybe you get a couple of those limiting beliefs and you get a statement and you watch your mind. You guard your mind for the next week and you see, hey, when you think that thought, right? When you feel that on the inside, you say, that's not my thought, and then you replace it with a thought that you've already written down. Does that make sense? 2 to 3 limiting beliefs, identify them, and a counter statement for that. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to write down 2 to 3 things that you want to create in your life. Maybe you're really undisciplined. You just can't get a habit of anything going. You can't get a habit with your physical life. You can't get a habit with your appointments, right? And maybe your statement is, I have incredible discipline. I'm the most disciplined person I know. And maybe when you think to yourself, it's just not worth it. I don't know if I'll ever get it. That's not my thought. I'm the most disciplined person I know. I can create any habit that I like.
What was the second one?
Okay, something that you would like to create in your life. Maybe you think, I just can't recruit people. How about, I'm the greatest recruiter in this hierarchy. People want to say yes to me. All right, when you think, gosh, I don't know if it's any use. I don't know if I'm... Wait a second, that's not my thought. I'm the greatest recruiter in this hierarchy. People want to say yes to me. And watch how many times a day these things bubble up. You ain't even aware that you're thinking right now. And they're controlling you like a Denise bot, right, Denise? Those limiting beliefs are walking you around out of your control. And all of a sudden, you get an operating system upgrade and you're like, wait a sec, I see that's not right. Okay? You following that? 2 to 3 of each. Okay? Where's my other slide here? Okay, 2 to 3 of each that you can take home tonight and you can start working on specifically. Right? Start working on specifically. Because here's the deal. At the end of the day, people quit things when they lose hope. They lose hope because in their own willpower, they don't have the power to overcome years and years and years of bad programming. And so it's easier to just forget about it than to have to deal with that reality over and over because they've never understood that they have the ability and now responsibility for our own programming. There's a channel in our head. Sometimes we need to get up and change the channel. Right? So what channel are you thinking on? What channel are you envisioning? What is your belief system that's holding you where you are? Okay, and the last thing that I want to challenge you to do is I want to challenge you to get 3 scenarios. 3 scenarios, okay, in your mind, and I want you to practice envisioning them every day for a couple of minutes. Right? Maybe it's what a day in your perfect life looks like. I watched that a million times. I could tell you what my pillars look like on my balcony off my master bedroom on my beach house in Florida. I can tell you what it looks like because I've been there before. Right? I've been there before.
Imagine them how many times?
Right. Well, at least a couple of times a day. Right? Okay? Because why? Because when you sense it, right, you put it down into your subconscious mind. Right? Okay. So I told you some of you, right? I had when I was working for the church, I was still part-time in the business. I had a little 5x8 sheet of paper next to my phone, my landline phone at the church desk, right? And it said things on it like, I am an RVP. I make $100,000 a year. Blah, 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 right? A little list of statements. Then that pad had stars all over it and little stick figures, all the drawings you do when you're, sitting there wasting time or whatever, right? Okay, that sucker was taped to my phone, next to my phone, right? And when I'd see it, it would remind me of what I was going for, right? And so after we left the church, right, a couple of years later, we were moving to our new house, the house that we have previously, that we're moving out of now to the new one. We moved into that in 2012, and we had a box, and in that box was a piece of paper. And I pulled it out, and it was that sheet of paper. And wouldn't you know, every single one of those things I had written down 1,000 times, scratching over, every last one of them had come true. How could that be? Right? I convinced myself of it, and then my subconscious mind allowed me to do the things that most of you won't do because you have a different operating system that doesn't allow you to walk that way, right? And I did it every day without, I've never felt this is work. To me, this is so hard, it's work. I never felt it was work. Why? Because my operating system believes I'm going to win. So if I'm going to win, let's just have fun then, right? Like if I know I'm going to win, why take the charge back so seriously? Next, right? Okay, right? I learned how to view things through the filter of where my subconscious mind was taking me. Y'all understand that? You figuring that out? Okay, good. So I want you to get a couple of visions that you can watch in your mind's eye, right? Like we got a convention coming, don't we?
Yep.
Why don't you how many of you ever gone across a stage at a builder school for recognition before? Raise your hand. Okay, good. Keep them raised. I want you to imagine that times 40 in a giant stadium. And I want you to see your name on the Jumbotron. And I want you to feel the flutter in your stomach. And I want you to watch yourself walk out in front of that stage and hold up that plaque, that RVP plaque, that whatever it is you're going for. I want you to see it. I want you to feel it. I want you to experience it over and over and over again. You know, Walt Disney built Epcot Center, and he died during the construction of Epcot Center, right? And so a bunch of news reporters, after Epcot opened, were having a news conference on its grand opening, and they were talking to Walt Disney's wife. And one of the reporters said, "Jeff, it's such a shame that Walt wasn't able to see this." She said, "No, sir, you're wrong. Walt saw this before anybody else." Why? He had a vision, and so he created that out of it, right? So listen, your subconscious mind, right? How many of you ever woke up out of a dream with a great idea? Right? Yeah. Or something you've been thinking about and you're like, dang, I got an answer to that, right? Why? Your subconscious mind's still working when you're sleeping. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. It's looking to perform for you what you have asked it to. Right? So what are you asking of it? The problem is most of you are asking nothing of it. It's just giving you what you told it to give you when you were 5 and couldn't make your own decision. That's what it's giving you. That's what it's been giving you your whole life, but it can change, right? So what do we need to do? Have clearly defined goals. We need to have an emotional charge with them. We need to take 2 to 3 limiting beliefs and have an opposing statement. And we need to be able to what? Recognize and replace. Recognize and replace. We need to have 2 to 3 things that we'd like to create in our life, and we need to have a statement, right, that affirms that in the present, right? I am the greatest recruiter in this hierarchy. Not one day I will be, not I hope, not I pray to be, I am, right? I am a present tense statement, right? Emotionally charged, and you need to have 2 to 3 visions of an event in your life, a place in your life, something that you want to experience and create, and you need to watch that, okay? Right? Because how do you give up on that? You don't. You don't, right? You don't give up on that. See, people who give up on anything, not just Primerica, but anything, they've lost hope, and they've lost hope because they're running on the default programming, and they're allowing the emotion to determine their belief. I feel this way, so therefore my belief is changing. I know I said till death do us part, but I feel this way, and so maybe that's not really what that meant, right? And I'm not condemning anybody here, but you understand what I'm saying? See, Jess and I, divorce isn't an option for us. So therefore, every argument, and sometimes we argue, right? Believe it or not. Sometimes we argue. Sometimes we get in fights. Sometimes I don't like her, right? And she doesn't like me, right? Okay? But see, the belief is that's not an option, so we find a way around it to solve the problem. But see, if the problem dictates the belief, well, this problem must mean this thing. Does that make sense? Right? Okay? So you get some of these fundamental beliefs shifted and put into your subconscious, and things are going to go so fast in the direction that you want, it's unbelievable. And things that happen against you and that are obstacles, which by the way are not going to go away. You don't have any less obstacles. You just deal with them differently because you see them as that. They're an obstacle. You're on a road trip from here to Florida. You get a flat tire in Tennessee. You don't buy a house and say, I guess God only wanted us to go this far. Right? Okay? You change the tire and you keep going, right? Okay? And that allows, why? Because you believe you're supposed to be going to Florida. You didn't come this far to stop in Tennessee. Okay? So where are you going? You're going to your goals. You're going to your dreams. You're going to the vision of the life you know you're supposed to live. Right? That's where you're going. So when you get an obstacle, you don't say, this is where I'm supposed to be. It's not for sale. You continue on to that destination you believe you're supposed to be at. Hopefully this was helpful to you guys. Yeah. I'll see you all soon. Let's play hard for month end.